Have you ever wondered why the moments that break you are the same moments that shape you? Why life sometimes takes everything from you, not to punish you, but to rebuild you? In Buddhism, there's a powerful truth. You don't grow in comfort, you grow in chaos. The pain you feel right now isn't the end. It's the beginning of a deeper awakening. Every heartbreak, every failure, every loss is life whispering, it's time to evolve. So before you give up, pause. Because what you're going through might just be the exact thing you needed to rise higher than ever before. This is where the transformation begins, when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" 1. Suffering breaks the illusion of who you think you are. Pain isn't just emotional discomfort. It is the moment life shakes the foundation of who you believe yourself to be. From childhood, we start building an identity based on what others tell us, what society expects, and what we think will make us worthy. We say, "I am valuable because I have this job, because I'm loved by this person, because I have these achievements." Without realizing it, we slowly construct a mask, a picture of who we think we are supposed to be. Then suffering arrives and breaks that mask. You lose the job that made you feel important. Someone you counted on walks away. A long-held dream collapses. At first, it feels like your entire world is falling apart, but in truth, it is only the false layers that are being removed. Buddhism teaches that this moment is known as ego death, not a literal death, but the end of the identity you once clung to. It feels painful because the ego wants to hold on to its old shape. But suffering doesn't appear to destroy you. It appears to show you what is not truly you. Everything you lost was simply a role, a title, a story. The job gave you status, but not your essence. The relationship gave you comfort, but not your soul. The success made you proud, but it didn't define your true nature. What suffering takes away are only the things that were temporary, unstable, or built on fear. They fall apart because they were never secure to begin with. When life hurts, it is not telling you that something is wrong with you. It is telling you that you have outgrown the identity you were holding on to. Like a snake shedding old skin, you are being pushed to release who you once were so you can become who you really are. The pain you feel is simply the tension between the old and the new. You are not the job you do, the victories you collect, or the people who stay by your side. You are much deeper than those things. But it is only in the moments of loss that you are forced to see beyond those identities. When the false self collapses, you finally meet the true self, the quiet witness beneath your achievements, your relationships, and your stories. This is why Buddhism honors suffering as a turning point. It is the doorway to authenticity. When what is false falls away, what remains is real. You start discovering a version of yourself that isn't dependent on approval, status, or external success. You discover inner strength, inner clarity, inner meaning. So when life takes something away, do not rush to rebuild the same identity. Pause and see what has been revealed. Because when the illusion dissolves, your real life begins, not the life built on fear or expectation, but the life built on truth. Who you thought you were is gone. Who you truly are is only beginning to emerge. 2. Life doesn't test you, it reveals you. We often say, "Life is testing me," as if the universe is pushing us to see how much we can take. But from a Buddhist perspective, life is not interested in testing your limits. It is simply showing you what already lives inside you. When everything is going smoothly, it's easy to believe you are patient, strong, wise, and kind. But ease hides truth. It's only when pressure arrives that your inner world becomes visible. If there is fear inside you, hardship will uncover it. If there is courage within you, difficulty will expose it. Pain is the mirror that reflects your true emotional landscape. Think about how you react when someone disappoints you, when your plans collapse, or when life unfolds differently from what you expected. Do you become angry, bitter, defensive, or do you remain calm, thoughtful, and flexible? Your reaction isn't created by the event. It was already within you, just waiting for the right moment to be revealed. This is why two people can go through the exact same situation and respond in completely different ways. One becomes resentful, the other becomes wiser. Nothing outside of them changed. Only what was inside was brought into the light. Life does not build your character. Life exposes the character you have been building quietly every day, through your thoughts, your habits, your mindset, and the choices you make when no one is watching. Most people only start working on their inner strength after they break. But the truth is, you were already building who you are long before the struggle arrived. When hardship shows up, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "What is this showing me about myself?" Maybe it's revealing that you depend too much on other people for happiness. Maybe it's showing that your confidence was tied to success rather than self-worth. Maybe it's uncovering emotional wounds you never healed. In this way, suffering becomes a spotlight. It lights up the parts of you that have been ignored or avoided, not to shame you, but to make you aware. Awareness is the beginning of transformation. Without seeing what lives inside you, you can never change it. So every difficult experience becomes a doorway, offering you a rare chance to understand yourself more honestly. You begin to see your fears, your attachments, your expectations, your emotional patterns. And with that understanding, you can choose who you want to become next. Life is not pushing you to fail. It is giving you the opportunity to see the truth of your inner world so you can evolve beyond it. There is no punishment here, only revelation, only awakening. The challenge does not create your strength. It shows you the strength you have been slowly building all along. It simply brings it from the hidden to the visible. When you realize this, suffering stops feeling like an attack. It becomes a mirror, reflecting not what is wrong with your life, but what is ready to grow. 3. The more you resist your season, the longer you stay in it. Life moves in seasons. Some seasons feel warm and joyful, full of love, success, and clarity. Others feel cold, confusing, or heavy, filled with loss, uncertainty, and change. Buddhism teaches that nothing in existence stays fixed. Everything rises, peaks, fades, and transforms. Yet most suffering comes not from the season itself, but from the human tendency to resist it. When life is asking us to move on, we cling. When life is asking us to grow, we remain still. When life is asking us to rest, we keep pushing. This resistance does not stop change. It only delays our peace. We hold on to relationships that have completed their purpose. We fight to keep jobs that drain our spirit. We remain in environments that no longer allow us to expand. We tell ourselves that things must stay the way they were, because we fear the unknown. But clinging to what is already over is like trying to warm yourself with ashes from a long dead fire. There is no life left there. Just as winter cannot be forced to become summer overnight, your life cannot be rushed into the next chapter before you are ready. But the moment you stop resisting, a quiet transformation begins. Acceptance doesn't mean you like what's happening. It simply means you stop fighting the natural rhythm of life. And when you stop fighting, the season completes its purpose and releases you. Think of pain as a messenger. When something in your life ends, a relationship, a job, a chapter, it is not an accident. It is life saying, this part of your story is complete. The harder you cling, the deeper the suffering. But when you loosen your grip, new paths appear. Every season has a reason. A winter season may arrive to slow you down, to help you heal, to make you reflect. A spring season comes to give you new beginnings, new opportunities, new energy. Summer brings stability, joy, and growth. Autumn teaches you to release, to let go of what you've gathered, old beliefs, old patterns, old dreams. Your suffering grows only when you try to live in the wrong season. When you demand summer during winter, you feel empty. When you cling to spring while autumn arrives, you feel loss. When you fear winter and try to run from it, you stay trapped in the cold far longer than necessary. Buddhism explains that every season carries wisdom, even the difficult ones, especially the difficult ones. Winter is not punishment, it is preparation. It is the time when the roots grow deeper, even though nothing seems to be happening above the surface. In the same way, during your hardest moments, something deep within you is being strengthened. Resilience, insight, patience, clarity. If you trust the season you're in, even pain becomes meaningful. You start to see that nothing is working against you. Everything is working through you. The storm is not there to drown you. It is there to cleanse you. When you stop resisting, your energy is no longer wasted on fighting reality. It becomes available for healing, learning, adapting, and growing. This is when your internal winter begins to thaw into spring. You may not control when a season begins or ends, but you do control how you move through it. If you surrender with awareness, the difficult season will pass more quickly, leaving you wiser, softer, and stronger. But if you resist, if you cling, if you insist that life go the way you want rather than the way it is meant to, then you remain stuck. Not because the universe is cruel, but because you refuse to move with it. Life rewards those who trust its timing. When you let go at the right moment, life carries you forward. When you surrender to the season, transformation begins. The pain you feel now is not a sign that life has abandoned you. It is simply the signal that a new chapter is trying to open. When you honor the season you are in, even if it is uncomfortable, you allow growth to happen naturally. And as surely as winter becomes spring, this season too will pass. 4. The wound is the proof that you are still alive. When life hurts, our first reaction is to believe something has gone terribly wrong. We think pain means failure, injustice, or punishment. But Buddhism teaches a different perspective. The presence of pain is not a sign of weakness or misfortune. It is proof that your inner life is still active, still capable of feeling, still capable of transformation. The wound shows that your heart is alive. Imagine someone who feels nothing at all. No sadness, no longing, no disappointment, no grief. At first, that might sound peaceful, but look deeper. That is not peace. That is emotional numbness, the state in which the heart has stopped responding to life. To feel pain means the heart remains open. It means you still care, you still hope, you still love. In that sense, the wound is not your enemy. It is evidence of your capacity to grow. Pain is similar to a cracked seed. When the shell breaks, it looks damaged. But inside, life has begun. The crack is not destruction, it is expansion. The seed breaks because something new is pushing through. In the same way, your wound is the entry point through which new wisdom, new strength, and new awareness begin to arise. The pain is the pressure of growth happening from the inside. We often think life pushes us into suffering because we did something wrong, but most suffering appears when the life you've been living is too small for who you are meant to become. Just as a snake must shed its skin to grow, human beings go through emotional shedding, the breaking apart of old beliefs, old attachments, and old identities. This process is uncomfortable and sometimes deeply painful, but without it, you would remain trapped in an outdated version of yourself. You can only expand when something within you has been disturbed. The wound shows that your inner world is waking up. You are becoming aware of truths that you once ignored. You are recognizing that the life you had was not aligned with who you are becoming. The wound is simply the physical or emotional sensation of transformation. We typically try to hide our wounds from others and from ourselves. We feel ashamed of being hurt. We think we should always appear strong, composed, and unbothered. But Buddhism teaches that the attempt to conceal pain is what leads to deeper suffering. A wound that is denied cannot heal. A wound that is accepted begins to transform. When you acknowledge your pain, not dramatizing it, not making it your identity, but simply allowing it, you create space around it. This space allows understanding, compassion, and clarity to arise. You start to see what the wound is trying to show you. Maybe it is teaching you to let go. Maybe it is asking you to rest. Maybe it is opening your eyes to needs and desires you have buried for years. The wound can also soften you. It takes away arrogance, pride, and the illusion that you are separate from others. When you are wounded, you realize that everyone suffers, everyone has a story, everyone has felt lost, abandoned, afraid, or broken. This realization expands the heart. You begin to understand others more deeply, to forgive more easily, to connect with sincerity. Your wound becomes the bridge that connects you to humanity. Even spiritually, pain has an important purpose. In many teachings, it is said that suffering cracks the ego. The ego tries to control everything, your image, your future, your relationships, the way others see you. But when life wounds you, the ego loses control. The walls you built begin to break, and through those cracks, the light of truth enters. The wound becomes the opening through which wisdom flows. So when life hurts, remember, the wound is not where you end, it's where you begin. It means you are still capable of feeling, loving, hoping, and growing. It means life is trying to move you forward, deeper into yourself, toward a truth you have not yet discovered. Pain is simply the moment when life asks you to pay attention. Do not rush to escape it. Do not judge it. Just listen. Because the wound is not your downfall. It is the birthplace of your becoming. 5. You cannot heal while you're busy narrating your pain. Most people don't realize that they don't just experience pain, they keep it alive by constantly telling a story about it. Something happens once in the physical world, but then we replay it in our mind hundreds of times, retelling it to ourselves, to others, and to the memory of who we were before it happened. The original event may have lasted a moment, a day, or a month, but the mind stretches it across years, sometimes even a lifetime. This is where suffering takes root. Pain itself is temporary. It is the storytelling that makes it endless. Buddhism teaches that the mind clings to stories because the ego wants meaning, identity, and control. When you say to yourself, "I was betrayed, I was abandoned, I failed," you are not simply describing the past. You are building a lens through which you see yourself and your future. The moment you turn pain into identity, it becomes a prison. The event no longer hurts you, the story does. We believe narrating our pain helps us understand it, but in many cases, it only keeps us tied to what happened. The mind circles around the same memory, the same disappointment, trying to make sense of it. But pain is not always meant to be dissected. Sometimes it is meant to be released. You can revisit the memory 100 times, and each visit strengthens the emotional imprint. This is why someone who was hurt years ago can still suffer as if it happened yesterday. The mind doesn't distinguish between what is happening now and what is being reimagined. When you tell the story again, your body and emotions react as if it is happening in the present. The wound never has a chance to close. It keeps reopening because you keep returning to it, not physically, but mentally. Healing begins when the story stops. Not because you deny what happened, but because you stop feeding it. A wound needs stillness to recover. If you keep touching it, poking it, reopening it, it cannot form new skin. In the same way, emotional wounds need silence. They need a pause from narration. They need space where you allow the pain to move through the body and then leave. But most of us cling to pain because it gives us a sense of identity. I am the one who was hurt. I am the one who was betrayed. That identity feels familiar, and the ego prefers familiarity over freedom. The story becomes a home, even when it hurts. Letting go of the story feels like losing a piece of ourselves, but in truth, it is the first step toward rediscovering who we were before the wound. The moment you stop narrating, you allow yourself to simply feel. Feeling is raw, direct, and honest. Narration is filtered, decorated, and shaped by the mind. When you sit quietly with your pain, without labeling it, without judging it, without explaining it, it begins to unravel on its own. The energy of the emotion rises, peaks, and then gradually subsides, just like a wave. But when you talk about it again and again, you stop this natural cycle. The wave never completes. It stays trapped inside you. Your mind becomes a container for the same story, looping endlessly. The body tenses, the heart tightens, and your life becomes smaller. There is no room for new experiences, because the old story occupies all the space. This is why silence is so powerful. Silence is not suppression, it is spaciousness. It allows you to observe without getting pulled into the narrative. Through silence, you begin to see that the event happened in time. But the suffering exists only in memory. You separate the pain from the story. You see that what happened is not happening now. You realize that the past cannot reach you unless you invite it. This realization breaks the cycle. Slowly, the story loosens its grip, and the pain loses its voice. You do not heal by finding the perfect explanation or repeating the story until it makes sense. You heal by letting the story fade, by no longer making it the central point of your life. This doesn't mean you erase your past. It means you stop anchoring yourself to it. You stop using it to define your worth, your identity, or your future. Without the narrative, the mind becomes lighter. Without the story, the heart becomes more open. The wound softens, breathes, closes. Healing is not about forgetting what happened. It is about remembering who you are beyond what happened. When the story dissolves, you return to your original nature, calm, spacious, aware. You regain the freedom to move forward, to create new experiences, to open your heart again. The past no longer becomes a weight, but a teacher. The pain becomes an experience, not an identity. And you finally realize that the story was never you. It was only something you carried. Once you put it down, you can walk freely again. 6. Silence transforms what noise cannot touch. When life hurts, most people instinctively run toward noise, conversation, entertainment, distractions, endless activity, anything that keeps them from sitting alone with their thoughts. We tell ourselves that staying busy will make the pain fade, that if we just keep moving, keep talking, keep surrounding ourselves with stimulation, we won't have to feel what is brewing inside. But Buddhism teaches that pain does not dissolve in noise. Noise only buries it. Real healing begins in silence. In silence, you are forced to meet yourself, your fears, your wounds, your emotions, your truth, without the shield of distraction. Silence is not empty. Silence is full of information that the noise of life keeps hidden. When you sit quietly, even for a few moments, you begin to notice things that were invisible before. You notice how tense your body has become from holding on to old stories. You notice how scattered your mind feels from clinging to what should have been. You begin to sense where the pain lives, in your chest, your stomach, your throat. And instead of running from it, you finally allow yourself to witness it. In that witnessing, something changes. The pain is no longer an enemy, it becomes an experience that you are capable of moving through. Silence gives the wound permission to breathe. And just like physical wounds heal faster when they are left alone and exposed to air, emotional wounds heal faster when they are touched by silence. Noise keeps the mind spinning. It keeps the emotions trapped in a cycle of resistance. But silence has the opposite effect. It uncovers. It softens. It slows everything down so the root of the suffering can be seen. Pain becomes clearer, more defined, less abstract. You stop feeling lost in a storm and begin to recognize the shape of the clouds. Clarity comes not from thinking more, but from thinking less. When the inner noise settles, truths that were drowned out before begin to rise gently to the surface. You start to understand what is truly hurting you, not the surface-level complaint, but the deeper cause beneath it. Maybe it's not the breakup that hurts, but the fear of being alone. Maybe it's not the failure that stings, but the weight of unrealistic expectations you placed on yourself. Silence reveals what noise hides. In modern life, silence can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. We are conditioned to fill every moment with sound, conversation, music, scrolling, or movement. Sitting with ourselves feels unfamiliar. We believe silence means doing nothing, but silence is an active state, a sacred inner work where the mind begins to settle and the heart begins to open. This is why many ancient traditions send seekers into silence before offering them deeper wisdom. Silence prepares the soul to receive truth. It makes the mind clear, receptive, flexible. In silence, the resistance you once felt slowly melts, and you can finally see what life has been trying to teach you. Think of a glass of muddy water. If you shake it constantly, the water remains cloudy. But if you set it down quietly, the dirt gradually settles to the bottom and the water becomes clear again. The mind is no different. When you keep shaking it with noise, distraction, or constant stimulation, your thoughts stay messy and confused. But when you sit in stillness, the emotional sediment settles. Your thoughts lose their frantic energy. Insight appears without effort. This is why answers often arrive not when you seek them loudly, but when you stop seeking and simply allow them to arise. Silence is not about isolating yourself from life forever. It is about entering a space where you can hear the truth that lives beneath your thoughts. When you are silent, you may notice that your pain begins to speak in a language beyond words. It may show itself as heaviness in your heart, tightness in your chest, or uneasiness in your stomach. But if you stay present, without judging, without resisting, the sensations begin to move. Emotions are energy, and energy flows when given permission. Silence gives that permission. Feelings that were frozen begin to thaw. Thoughts that were stuck begin to fade. Slowly, without force, the pain begins to transform. Silence also reconnects you to your inner wisdom, the part of you that knows how to heal without instruction, the part that finds its way without being told what to do. This inner wisdom is always present, but in the chaos of noise and thought, you lose touch with it. Silence brings you back to it. You begin to realize that you are not the wounded story you tell yourself. You are the awareness that observes the story. You realize you are not your thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts arise and disappear. This shift in identity is the beginning of liberation. Many people fear silence because they believe it will make their pain worse. But silence doesn't increase your pain. It simply reveals what has already been there. Avoiding silence doesn't protect you from pain. It only prolongs it. When you finally allow yourself to be still, the pain that has been knocking at your heart for months or years finally has a chance to be heard and released. Healing happens not because silence erases the past, but because silence changes your relationship with it. You stop fighting your emotions. You stop trying to control your thoughts. You become a witness, and in witnessing, you find peace. Over time, silence becomes a sanctuary, a place you can return to whenever life becomes heavy. You learn that silence is not loneliness. Silence is companionship with your own soul. It is where you remember who you are beneath everything you've experienced. It is where new strength grows quietly. It is where clarity rises naturally. It is where the heart learns to beat again without fear. Noise only distracts. Silence transforms. Noise keeps your wounds open. Silence allows them to close. Noise binds you to the story. Silence frees you from it. And when silence has done its work, you don't come out smaller. You come out wiser, lighter, and more whole than you ever were before. 7. You didn't survive to go back. You survived to become someone new. When life breaks you, the first instinct many people have is to try to return to the way things were before the pain. They want the old relationship back, the old job back, the old feeling back, the old version of themselves back. They tell themselves, if I can just get things back to how they used to be, I will finally feel okay again. But Buddhism teaches a powerful truth. What breaks you is also what frees you. You didn't survive the storm so you could rebuild your old life. You survived so you could grow beyond it. Life does not take you backward, it only moves forward, even when your heart tries to cling to what is familiar. The version of you that existed before the suffering was built on old beliefs, old fears, old patterns, and old expectations. Pain came to shake those foundations because they could no longer carry you. The heartbreak, the loss, the failure, they were not simply random events, they were turning points. They arrived to show you that the person you once were had reached their limit. You could not grow inside the life you had, so life had to break that structure open. The collapse was not the end, it was the beginning of transformation. It is natural to grieve the past. It is natural to wish for what was familiar. But the truth is that the past no longer fits you. Imagine wearing clothes from childhood. They might have once been perfect, but now they would feel tight, restrictive, and uncomfortable. Trying to return to your old life is no different. You have outgrown it. Even if you could return to that life, you would find that it no longer feels right, because you have changed internally. The suffering reshaped you. It forced you to see the world differently, to see yourself differently, to understand what truly matters and what does not. Going back would mean abandoning the wisdom you gained. Growth does not happen by rebuilding an old life. It happens by allowing a new life to emerge naturally from what you have learned. After pain, you are not meant to be who you were. You are meant to be more conscious, more compassionate, more awake. The experiences that hurt you were not meaningless. They were burning away what no longer served you. Like metal refined in fire, you were placed in a situation that melted away your impurities, your illusions, your fears, your attachments, and when the fire faded, what remained was your strongest form. Sometimes life closes doors not to trap you, but to tell you that the path behind you is no longer where you belong. The relationship that ended taught you what love should and should not be. The failure you faced taught you resilience. The loss you endured taught you to value presence. The mistakes you made taught you humility and wisdom. The emptiness you felt taught you to find meaning within yourself rather than in external things. Every difficult moment was preparing you for a life that aligns more closely with your deeper purpose. When you stop trying to go back, you open the space for what is meant to arrive. New opportunities, new relationships, new passions, new clarity, all enter only when the old has been released. Life cannot hand you a new chapter if you are gripping the pages of the previous one. The more tightly you hold onto the past, the more you block your own evolution. But when you let go, not with bitterness, but with understanding, you allow transformation to unfold naturally. You may not yet know what you are becoming, and that uncertainty can be frightening. But growth often requires moving before you see the full path. A seed does not know exactly what the sunlight will turn it into. It only knows that it must split open and rise. That splitting open is painful, But it is also the birth of something greater. In the same way, when life breaks you open, it is not to end you. It is to make way for a higher version of yourself that has been waiting beneath the surface. Think of all the ways you have changed because of what you went through. Your mind is sharper. Your heart is deeper. Your priorities are clearer. Your compassion is wider. Your awareness is stronger. These shifts did not happen in comfort. They happened in struggle. This is why returning to your old life cannot lead to peace. You can only find peace by honoring who you have become. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is accepting that the old life is gone. It is not something you must mourn forever, but something you must bless and release. It served its purpose. It brought you to this point. And now its task is complete. The future is not found by clutching what is lost. It is found by trusting what is beginning. You survived because there is more for you to learn, more for you to experience, more for you to contribute. You survived because a wiser, stronger, more conscious version of you is ready to take form. The pain was not a barrier, it was a doorway. The struggle was not a setback, it was a recalibration. The end was not destruction, it was rebirth. You are not meant to return to who you were before the storm. You are meant to meet the person you became because of it. You are meant to walk forward with the knowledge, insight, and strength the suffering awakened within you. This is the gift of pain. It expands you. It shapes you. It calls forth a deeper, truer version of yourself. You didn't survive to go backward. You survived to evolve. You survived to awaken. You survived to become someone new, someone who walks with greater purpose, greater compassion, and greater understanding of what life truly is. That is the direction your soul is asking you to follow. And when you embrace that path, life begins again, not as a repetition of the past, but as the unfolding of your truest self. 8. The path forward is revealed only when you stop demanding answers. One of the greatest causes of suffering is our desperate need to know why everything is happening, how it will unfold, and what comes next. When we are hurt, confused, or lost, we immediately begin searching for explanations and guarantees. We want certainty, logic, and answers that make everything feel safe again. We tell ourselves that if we could just understand the purpose behind the pain, if we could predict the outcome of the future, then we would finally be able to relax. But Buddhism teaches that the mind's search for instant clarity is not a path toward peace. It is often the very thing that keeps us trapped in suffering. The truth is that life rarely reveals its wisdom up front. The meaning appears slowly over time through experience, reflection, and inner growth. In difficult times, the mind becomes restless. It asks questions endlessly. Why did this happen to me? What am I supposed to do now? What will my life look like from here? Will I ever feel whole again? The more we demand answers, the more anxious we become, because no answer can satisfy a heart still in pain. The mind tries to force certainty, but life refuses to be forced. The future remains quiet. The silence frustrates us, and we begin to believe that life is ignoring us. But the silence is not a punishment. It is an invitation. When life withholds answers, it is guiding you inward. It is asking you to stop looking for explanations outside and begin listening to the truth rising slowly within you. True understanding does not come from thinking harder or analyzing deeper. It comes from surrender, from releasing the demand to know everything immediately and allowing the path to reveal itself one step at a time. When you stop trying to control the outcome, your perception begins to shift. You start noticing signs, intuitions, small openings, subtle insights that were previously hidden by the noise of your questioning. Answers appear not because you chased them, but because you finally became quiet enough to receive them. This is the paradox of spiritual growth. You find clarity only after you stop insisting on it. We are conditioned to believe that knowledge brings security. In school, in work, in relationships, we are taught that understanding equals control. But in the inner world, understanding begins where control ends. The need to know is the ego's strategy to avoid vulnerability. If we can predict everything, we think we can avoid disappointment. If we can understand everything, we think we can avoid pain. But life does not work that way. Growth requires uncertainty. Healing requires mystery. A seed does not know exactly how it will grow into a tree. It only knows that it must move toward the light. In the same way, you do not need all the answers to take the next step. You only need trust. The human mind wants to see the entire road before taking the first step. But the soul works differently. It reveals the path only as we walk. The first step is given. Then, once we take it, the second becomes visible. Then the third. If you wait to see every detail of the journey before moving, you will remain stuck, not because the path is absent, but because you are refusing to walk. Life guides those who are willing to move, even without certainty. One of the greatest spiritual strengths is learning to proceed with faith when the mind has no clear explanation. When you stop demanding answers, something subtle but profound happens. You begin to feel present again. You stop living inside the mind's projections of the future and return to the experience of this moment. You start noticing the breath, the environment, the emotions passing through your body. You begin to realize that your life is still happening right now, not at some future moment when everything makes sense. You might still feel confused, wounded, or uncertain, but you are alive, and that aliveness holds more truth than any explanation. Presence becomes the anchor that steadies you while life rearranges itself. Often the answers we demand are impossible to receive immediately because we are not yet ready to understand them. A truth given too early is not helpful. It becomes overwhelming or meaningless. Only after a wound begins to heal can we look back and see the lesson it offered. Only after time passes can we perceive how life was shaping us. What feels like chaos in one moment often reveals itself as necessary transformation later. Pain has meaning, but the meaning unfolds according to its own timing. You cannot rush wisdom. There are things you know today that you could not have understood 5 years ago. There are insights you hold now that would have confused you in the past. In the same way, the experiences you are living through now will offer clarity later. You will look back and realize why certain things ended, why certain people left, why certain plans collapsed, and why certain paths opened. But you will only see it when you are ready. Demanding answers before their time is like digging up a seed to check if it is growing. You only interrupt the process. In silence, another truth becomes clear. Much of what we call clarity is actually the desire to control the future. We don't want answers for growth. We want answers to protect ourselves from discomfort. But real clarity is not protection. Real clarity is the ability to move with life rather than against it. It is the willingness to say, I do not know what will happen, but I trust that I will meet whatever comes with awareness and strength. That trust is the foundation on which a new life is built. Buddhism teaches that grasping for answers creates suffering because it resists the natural flow of existence. Life is fluid, shifting moment to moment. When we cling to certainty, we hold on to something that does not exist. The future is not a fixed shape waiting to be uncovered. It is something that grows with us. It forms according to our choices, our awareness, our intentions, and our willingness to let go of what no longer serves us. The future is not revealed, it is created. Letting go of the demand for answers does not mean becoming passive. It means shifting from force to participation. It means taking responsibility for the choices you can make now while accepting that some mysteries must unfold slowly. You still make plans, take steps, and move forward, but you do so with openness instead of fear, curiosity instead of control. This is how new realities emerge. The path ahead is not revealed to those who demand to know everything. It is revealed to those who have the courage to take the next small step, even when they cannot see far. It is revealed to those who embrace uncertainty as part of the journey. It is revealed to those who remain present, attentive, and receptive. You do not need to know the entire story to turn the page. You only need to trust that there is meaning in every chapter. When you stop demanding answers, life becomes gentler. You begin to relax into what is happening rather than fighting against it. You stop viewing confusion as a problem and begin seeing it as a natural part of growth. You understand that not knowing is not a failure. It is a stage. Just like a seed sits in the dark before it breaks through the soil, you may also spend time in uncertainty before clarity finds you. But this darkness is not empty. It is preparation. Eventually the answers you seek will arrive, not with force, but with quiet certainty. They will come not from reasoning, but from lived experience. They will feel less like information and more like recognition, as if something inside you has been waiting all along to hear them. You will realize that life never withheld answers to punish you. It withheld them to deepen you. It waited until you were strong enough, wise enough, open enough to receive them. You do not need to rush the unfolding of your life. You do not need to beg for clarity. You only need to remain awake, patient, and willing to walk forward with an open heart. The path is always here, but you must stop shouting for directions before you can hear the whisper that guides you. When the mind quiets, the heart speaks, and the heart always knows the way. 9. What you call falling apart is often life rebuilding you from the inside out. When something in your life collapses, a relationship, a dream, a belief, a sense of identity, your first reaction is often panic. You feel as though the ground beneath you has disappeared, as though everything stable has suddenly dissolved. You tell yourself that life is falling apart, that everything is going wrong, that you are losing control. But Buddhism teaches that collapse is not always destruction. Very often, what you interpret as falling apart is actually life reorganizing itself at a deeper level. What looks like chaos is, in truth, a restructuring, a silent rebuilding that starts from within, long before it becomes visible in the world around you. We tend to build our lives around familiar structures, relationships that gave us comfort, dreams that guided us, routines that made us feel stable. Over time, these structures become part of our identity. We cling to them, believing that without them, we wouldn't know who we are. But life is not static. It continues moving, evolving, transforming. And when your inner growth outpaces the structure of your outer life, those structures begin to crack. Not because you did something wrong, but because they are no longer aligned with the person you are becoming. This is why collapse feels so frightening. You are being separated from what once supported you. But what supported you before might now be restricting you. That relationship that once felt safe may now be limiting your growth. That job that once gave you purpose may now be keeping you small. That belief that once guided you may now be too narrow for your expanding awareness. When life starts to remove these things, you feel as though you are being punished. But in reality, you are being prepared. True transformation rarely begins with joy. It begins with disruption. Before a seed becomes a tree, it must break open. From the outside, the seed looks destroyed, but that breaking is the beginning of life. In the same way, when life breaks you open, it is not ending you, it is beginning you. The falling apart is simply the cracking of your old shell, the one that has grown too tight for your spirit. The version of you that is emerging needs more space than the old life could offer. When everything feels like it is collapsing, you often try to hold it together with force. You cling to the past, to familiar habits, to people who no longer see you, to beliefs that no longer serve you. You keep trying to glue the broken pieces together, hoping that if you try hard enough, life will return to what it once was. But the truth is that nothing is meant to go back. Once transformation begins, there is no return. The old structures must dissolve so new ones can arise. The only reason collapse feels unbearable is because the mind refuses to let go. Life is rebuilding you, but the mind wants reconstruction to happen without losing anything. You want to become new while still holding on to the old. You want growth without change, but genuine transformation demands release. Something must be cleared away so something new can take root. The falling apart is not failure, it is purification. It removes what is false, what is weak, what is temporary. It uncovers what is true, what is strong, and what is destined. Many people look back on the hardest periods of their lives and realize those were the moments that changed everything. The heartbreak that shattered you taught you self-respect. The disappointment that crushed you taught you patience. The failure that humiliated you forced you to find a new direction. The loss that broke you forced you to discover your inner strength. It was not the comfortable seasons that transformed you. It was the painful ones. You may not see it now, but the pieces of your life are not falling randomly. They are falling into place. You are being shaped into a new form. But transformation always begins in the unseen. Just as a tree grows its roots in darkness before rising toward the sun, your growth is happening beneath the surface before you can see it. The confusion you feel, the emptiness, the uncertainty, these are signs that life is working within you. Your inner foundation is being rebuilt, slowly and quietly. It is important to understand that collapse does not mean destruction of your essence. Your true self cannot be destroyed. What breaks is only the false identity, the temporary structures, the illusions you once believed. You may lose what you wanted, but you will not lose what is meant for your soul. Life removes what is misaligned so that alignment can return. Everything that falls away is making space for something deeper, something more authentic. There will be moments when you feel that nothing is happening, that your life is empty, that you have no direction. But emptiness is not absence, it is openness. It is the space needed for new meaning to emerge. When a cup is full, nothing new can enter. When your life is full of old attachments, old beliefs, old patterns, the new cannot find space. The falling apart clears the cup. Only in emptiness can new vision arise. You are not meant to rush this process. Trying to fill the space too soon simply recreates old patterns. When everything falls apart, the first task is not to rebuild. It is to listen. Listen to what your heart is saying now that the noise has faded. Listen to what your intuition has been whispering. Listen to the quiet truths that surface when the familiar is gone. Those truths guide the rebuilding. Rebuilding from the inside out means that the new life you create will not be based on fear, desperation, or pressure. It will not be built from the expectations of others or the need to fit into old roles. It will be built from awareness, from what you have learned about yourself, what you value, what you desire, what you are willing to walk away from, and what you are ready to embrace. This is how a life rooted in consciousness is formed. As you shift from the inside, the outside must eventually follow. Old relationships fall away because your heart no longer resonates with them. Old dreams fade because they belonged to a version of you that no longer exists. New opportunities arise because you are ready to receive them. People who share your new frequency begin to enter your life. Paths you would never have noticed before begin to appear. None of this happens by force. It unfolds naturally as your inner foundation stabilizes. What once felt like destruction eventually reveals itself as direction. You realize that life was not trying to take everything from you. It was trying to make room for everything meant for you. The collapse was not chaos, it was clarity. It was life saying, "This is not your path anymore." there is something greater ahead. In time, you will see that nothing was lost that was essential. You only lost what you were outgrowing. You only lost what could not walk with you into the future. The people who remained became deeper. The values that stayed became clearer. The dreams that survived became stronger. You were not being broken. You were being refined. So when it feels like your world is falling apart, remember, life is rebuilding you from the inside out. Trust the collapse. Honor the dismantling. For beneath the ruins of what once was, a new foundation is being laid. A foundation built not on fear, but on truth. You are not ending. You are beginning. 10. You heal faster. When you stop trying to be who you were before the pain. One of the greatest struggles during difficult chapters in life is the hidden pressure we put on ourselves to go back to normal. We believe that healing means returning to the same mindset, the same optimism, the same energy, the same version of ourselves that existed before everything changed. We keep comparing our current self to who we were before the heartbreak, before the disappointment, before the loss, before the trauma. We look at our old self with longing, thinking, I just want to be like that again. But Buddhism teaches that this is the very attachment that slows down our healing. You are not supposed to go back to who you were before. That version of you was not designed to carry the lessons you now carry. Growth requires evolution, not rewind. The desire to return to the old self is natural. That past version felt lighter, more certain, more trusting. But that version of you existed before you saw what you have seen, felt what you have felt, learned what you have learned. You cannot unlive the chapters you have walked through. The mind wants to cling to the memory of who you once were because it feels familiar and safe. But safety is not always truth. Sometimes the old you was naive. Sometimes the old you was emotionally small. Sometimes the old you was blind to things your pain now allows you to see clearly. That is why Buddhism teaches that clinging to past identity creates suffering, because the person you are clinging to no longer exists. Healing is not about returning. Healing is about integrating. It is not about retrieving your old self. It is about honoring what has changed and allowing a new version of you to emerge. When you stop trying so hard to go back, you allow yourself to move forward. You stop fighting life and begin to align with it. You stop resisting change and begin to flow with it. And in that flow, healing happens naturally, quietly, without force. Think of a tree that loses its leaves in the winter. It does not try to grow the exact same leaves again. It does not panic and say, I must return to who I was last summer. The tree understands that new leaves will grow, different, fresh, shaped by new conditions. The tree does not mourn what it once was. It simply continues to evolve. In the same way, you are meant to grow new emotional branches, new sources of strength, new layers of understanding. Your former self served a purpose. It carried you to a certain stage, but the experiences you've had, especially the painful ones, have been reshaping your inner world. Trying to go back would mean abandoning the wisdom you gained. Much of the suffering people feel after life hurts them comes from comparing themselves to their old identity. You tell yourself, I used to trust people easily. I used to feel so fearless. I used to dream big. I used to be happy. These comparisons become chains. They create shame and self-judgment. You begin to think something is wrong with you because you can't feel the way you once felt. But nothing is wrong. You are simply changing. You are becoming more thoughtful, more discerning, more aware. Your innocence may have softened, but your consciousness has deepened. The old you was built for a world that no longer exists. A new world is forming inside you, slowly, quietly, and that requires a new identity. You may be more cautious now, but perhaps that caution is wisdom. You may love differently now, but perhaps that love is more grounded. You may not trust as blindly, but perhaps your trust will hold more truth. Pain does not take from you without giving something in return. It gives you insight, sensitivity, emotional depth, and a connection to others who suffer. These qualities are not signs that you are broken. They are signs that you are awakening. Healing becomes difficult when you judge your transformation as failure. When you believe you must bounce back to who you were before, you begin fighting yourself. You ignore what your heart is telling you. You rush your emotions. You pretend to be healed when you are still processing. You push yourself into situations that no longer resonate with you simply because they once did. You force friendships, habits, careers, or identities that your soul has already outgrown. This self-betrayal creates more suffering than the original pain. In Buddhism, the self is not a fixed identity. It is a river. It flows, changes, expands, and never remains exactly the same. Your past self was simply one expression of your consciousness. Now another expression is emerging. If you let the river flow, it will carry you to places you have never seen, to strengths you didn't know you had, to wisdom you could not have imagined. But if you dam the river, trying to hold on to the past, the water grows stagnant. It breeds confusion, resentment, and emotional decay. Letting yourself evolve is the most compassionate thing you can do for your own soul. The person you became through suffering is more capable of understanding others. You now know what real sorrow feels like, so you recognize it in others. You now know what anxiety feels like, so you show gentleness to people who are scared. You now know what disappointment feels like, so you don't judge others when they fail. Your pain did not destroy you. It deepened you. It gave you access to empathy, compassion, and humility. These are qualities the old you did not yet possess. Would you really trade this depth just to return to innocence? There is something else that pain gives you: discernment. Before, you may have accepted anyone into your life. You may have said yes to things that drained you. But now, after suffering, you choose more carefully. You protect your time. You guard your energy. You stand up for your worth. You are less willing to betray yourself just to please others. This is not brokenness. This is maturity. Pain taught you boundaries. It taught you that not everyone deserves a seat at your table. The old you allowed anyone in. The new you chooses with intention. Many people misunderstand healing and imagine that it means feeling happy all the time again. But true healing does not erase emotion. It changes your relationship with it. You still feel sadness, but you are not swallowed by it. You still fear, but you are not paralyzed by it. You still remember the pain, but it no longer defines you. True healing does not remove the wound. It transforms the wound into wisdom. You carry the scar, but the scar becomes a reminder of how deeply you have lived. When you stop trying to be who you were before the pain, you open space inside yourself to become someone wiser, someone more courageous, someone more conscious. This new version of you might be quieter, it might be more deliberate, it might be more selective, but it is also more aligned with truth. Healing means no longer trying to fit into your old life, because your spirit has already outgrown it. Healing means walking forward without needing to know exactly who you are becoming, trusting that your becoming is guided by forces wiser than the mind. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to rewrite your story. You are allowed to build a life that makes sense for who you are now, not who you used to be. You are allowed to move at a slower pace. You are allowed to feel things more deeply. You are allowed to love differently. You are allowed to dream differently. You are allowed to release people who only knew your old self. Healing gives you permission to evolve. The old you was real. The old you mattered. But the old you is complete. It brought you here. It gave you everything it could give. Now, a new self is growing beneath the surface. One that honors your scars rather than hides them. One that sees with clarity rather than illusion, one that walks with intention rather than impulse. Only when you stop clinging to the old self can the new self finally breathe. Your healing accelerates the moment you release the expectation to go back. There is no going back. There is only going forward into deeper authenticity, honesty, and wholeness. You do not heal by becoming who you once were. You heal by allowing yourself to become who you are now meant to be. Healing is not a race, nor is it a return to the life you once recognized. It is an unfolding, a quiet rearranging of everything you thought you understood about yourself and the world around you. The moments that felt like your greatest breakdowns were never evidence that life was against you. They were the moments life was most focused on you, urging you to grow beyond the limits of who you used to be. Pain does not come to destroy you. It comes to reveal you. It comes to pull forward a stronger, wiser, more awake version of you that could not have emerged in times of comfort. There will be days when you wake up feeling lost, uncertain, or painfully aware of how much has changed. There will be moments when you look at your life and barely recognize it. But this unfamiliarity is not failure. It is transition. You are moving from one chapter of your existence into another. Even if the bridge feels shaky, even if the destination is not yet visible, trust that the act of crossing is itself a sacred step. No one becomes wiser by remaining unmoved. No one becomes deeper by staying who they have always been. Every experience, especially the difficult ones, has been shaping you quietly from within. The way rivers carve stone, not with violence, but with persistence. You have learned resilience not because life has been gentle, but because life has been honest. You have learned to see clearly, not because everything made sense, but because you learned to sit with questions without forcing resolutions. You have learned compassion not through innocence, but through surviving your own storms, understanding how pain softens the heart and humbles the ego. You are not meant to be untouched by life. You are meant to be transformed by it. The losses you mourned, the disappointments that crushed you, the dreams that dissolved, none of them were wasted. They stripped away what you were never meant to keep. They revealed what mattered. They confronted your illusions. They dissolved old identities. They prepared the internal space for something new to take root. Without those ruptures, you would have remained confined to a smaller version of yourself. Without those cracks, the light could not have entered. Healing does not ask you to forget the past. It asks you to stop carrying it. It asks you to loosen your grip on what is gone and open your hands to what wishes to arrive. It asks you to treat your pain not as a permanent identity, but as a temporary season, one that has its own lessons, meaning, and purpose. Even if the pain lingers, even if some questions remain unanswered, learning to walk alongside what hurts without resisting it is already a form of freedom. There will come a day when you look back and see how every moment, especially the ones you feared the most, guided you toward a deeper version of yourself. You will see that the collapse was not chaos, but clearing. You will understand that life was not falling apart. It was falling into place. You will realize that the people who left made room for those who would truly see you. You will see how the dreams that died gave birth to dreams more aligned with your soul. You will recognize that the endings were not punishments, but invitations. And most importantly, you will see that the person you became through all of this is someone you could not have imagined before. Someone more courageous, someone more present, someone more aware, someone who sees life not as something to control, but something to participate in. Someone who no longer needs certainty to trust or perfection to be grateful. Someone who knows that peace is not the absence of pain, but the ability to remain open in the middle of it. You may not have chosen every chapter of your story, but you have the power to choose what those chapters make of you. You can let them close your heart, or you can let them expand it. You can let them make you fearful, or you can let them make you wise. You can let them turn you bitter, or you can let them teach you compassion. Growth is not about avoiding hardship. It is about meeting hardship with awareness, patience, and willingness to be transformed by it. This journey is not easy, but you are already proving that you were made for it. Every breath you take, every step you make, every quiet moment you allow yourself to feel instead of flee, these are victories. Healing is not a destination, it is a way of being. It unfolds slowly, gently, silently, until one day you realize that you are no longer fighting life, but flowing with it. You are becoming, you are unfolding. You are learning to carry both the sorrow of what was and the hope of what will be. And somewhere within you, beneath the fear, beneath the doubt, beneath the wounds, there is a quiet knowing that you were not meant to remain the same. You were meant to rise, to soften, to awaken. Nothing you've gone through was wasted. Every experience was a stepping stone. Every loss was a turning point. Every wound was a doorway. Forward is the only direction life truly moves. Forward is where your becoming continues. Forward is where the truth of who you are waits to meet you. This is your path, not back to who you were, but toward who you are meant to be.